Hi, everybody, and welcome to another great episode of the Infrastructure as Code podcast. Today we have an amazing guest, Derek. But before Derek, you introduce yourself, I'm Ohad Maislish, your host for today. You can follow me at DevOps Ohad in Twitter, and you can check out more episodes of the Infrastructure as Code podcast at the IaC Podcast.com in Spotify and other platforms. So, Derek, great having you today. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
Thanks. Please tell us about your background.
Okay. Yeah. I started very classically in the Microsoft realm, working for managed hosting providers and managed services. I was once a exchange admin, which is something I hope to never, ever have to do again. Basically, after you deal with enough Microsoft products, you finally get pretty exhausted by it and start making a move. So I started with Linux, Red Hat certifications, everything else, and then started working more and more in the Linux realm. Started using AWS, got tired of clicking around the console, saw Terraform, and haven't looked back since.
Awesome. So yeah, talking about Microsoft, honestly, you probably don't know, but I worked for Microsoft as well, 20 something years ago, when Windows 2000 was
Oh, no.
was created. So yeah, the Microsoft ecosystem, the server with the Windows and IIS as
Yep.
the approach for web server. I'm not sure if it's just a rumor, but 20 years ago I was told that Microsoft.com is hosted by an Apache server, not IIS. But again, maybe it was just a rumor. But a lot have evolved since. So, what have you seen in the last like decade or two happening in infrastructure and Microsoft and Linux and cloud?
I mean, the largest thing that I've probably seen aside from virtualization and all of these steps is just the attempt to move to a more ephemeral environment in every way possible. It used to be you have the server, and reboots were such a huge thing with Microsoft because
Mhm.
that's downtime.
Yep.
Um, so you'd end up having your load balancers and everything else, and you have to manage all this stuff and figure out how you're going to do these reboots. And then, of course, you have a check disk run after a reboot, and all of a sudden your database is down. This is may or may not be a true story. Um, but so you start working harder and harder to ensure your infrastructure does what it needs to do, when it needs to do it, and how it needs to do it. And in this pursuit of getting these ephemeral environments where you don't have to worry about which server is up, I think one of the sayings is treat your servers like pets, or like cattle, not pets. You want to
Mhm.
manage your servers. You don't want to name them. You don't want to know what's going on. You just need to know that the workloads are running.
Mhm.
And in this pursuit of getting this like this, we've continued to evolve. Of course, you start with your VMware and your virtualization and all of that. And then after that, all of a sudden, EC2 came out and put pretty
Mhm.
much all of these hosting services on notice. I was at one of the ones that I believe is gone now. Obviously, Rackspace is still around. A few more have
Mhm.
managed to continue, but a lot of them were lost in that change. And then, of course, after EC2, we then jump into containers. We got the
Yep.
workloads even smaller and more ephemeral. We can restart them no matter what. Everything continues working. And then, of course, from containers, then you have serverless. And of course, I'm sure somebody's going to be in the comment section talking about how all the cloud is still Linux servers or serverless is just containers or whatever. But overall, after you've got the abstractions in the way, you kind of know exactly what you're working with, and that's your workload, not necessarily the nuts and bolts keeping it going.
Mhm. Yeah, definitely. Talking about those providers that are maybe gone, I remember Terramark. Not sure if you remember Terramark as well, but
I
I
don't
remember
think I do
using.
actually.
Yeah, it was like 2007, I believe. That
A little bit before my time, I think, actually.
okay. That's funny. Cool. So during all of this transition in technologies, where do you find yourself? Like you're a big educator for so many
Mhm.
DevOps engineers. Tell us more about how you influence the industry.
My thing, and we all want to be on the cutting edge all the time, but of course, I do have to realize that we still have legacy workloads in the cloud. There's still people who are going to be on EC2 for the rest of their lives. And that's perfectly fine. So my thing and what I really hinge on, which is why I still have a successful Jenkins course, for instance, is,
Mhm.
I'm here to help people get things done in the best way possible, whatever that means for them. And, again, some people, the cost to move to serverless would take decades to recoup versus just running a single, you know, EC2 server in the cloud. They're perfectly fine just doing that forever. So I want to teach people how to use tools like Terraform and OpenTofu as it matures, even Ansible if they have to, Jenkins, M0, whatever they need to do. They're using these tools to solve a problem. So I want to focus on the fact that these are just tools, and you're going to use different tools for different things. Not if one tool promises to do everything, that's actually kind of scary to me. I
Mhm.
know, there's somewhere that they can't afford the best developers to develop.
Mhm.
Um, so I try to stay focused on teaching people why they're using the tools and what they're trying to accomplish versus how cool is this tool and why you should use this tool over the other, whatever. It's not about the tools, it's about the processes, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, so let's zoom in on code, okay, and
Mhm.
engineers writing code in order to manage their cloud operations. You've mentioned both infrastructure as code, such as Terraform and OpenTofu, and you've also mentioned Ansible. How do you see those two technologies work hand in hand? What is your vision going forward about those tools?
That's probably the number one question I still get asked by new learners. Ansible is overall falling to the wayside as far as new workloads are concerned. If you've got a greenfield project, congratulations, you can probably avoid Ansible. But when you're talking about those EC2 servers that I mentioned earlier,
Mhm.
uh, Ansible's still a very, very valid thing. I know I've got workloads in a manufacturing company that I've worked with one of my startups. And these workloads, like there are times where we just have to restart a service. There's nothing we can do. These are physical servers. So what we
Mhm.
do is we just run an Ansible script, takes care of everything, easy peasy. But as far as actually deploying things to the cloud and deploying infrastructure, sticking with Terraform is going to be, or OpenTofu, or something with a true state is what we're going to want to focus on. I want to make
Yeah,
sure that we have access to that state. We can query that state. We know how everything looks at any given time. So those types of tools are always going to be the best. Now, in one of my courses, I actually use Terraform to call Ansible and run,
mhm.
things on EC2 servers, once run scripts and stuff like that. So there are times where you will use both, and it's a perfectly acceptable option when you need to.
Yeah. From my experience, I've worked. I developed code in Java, and you have that POM XML file that basically defines all of the capabilities in the Java server that you're going to run, like Tomcat. And Ansible is very powerful to configure the needed configuration in different environments that execute something applicative, such as Java code with its POM XML. By the way, also Chef and Puppet and other configuration
Mhm.
management systems, but Ansible had its advantages and became the de facto leader in configuration management. And yeah, as you mentioned, the state file or just understanding the state is very important when thinking about managing infrastructure. And Terraform and OpenTofu uh, have that approach. But before we zoom in on maybe Terraform, OpenTofu, and infrastructure as code um, updates and licenses and things like that. You didn't mention, you mentioned Terraform like 5 times already in this conversation. You didn't mention CloudFormation. You didn't mention Pulumi or Crossplane. What are your thoughts about other technologies in infrastructure as code that are not Terraform based?
It all depends on the workload. I think CloudFormation definitely has a place, especially in more simple workloads. I did a lot of CloudFormation working for some of the training companies I've worked for in the past, and there are times where CloudFormation just doesn't quite fit into that GitOps pipeline that I'd like to see, although it can work. But a lot of times you're using code pipeline and some of the others, which in my very humble opinion, don't quite fit the bill in a lot of cases. It's kind of just, it's a little clunkier than I would like. CloudFormation itself, I mean, if you need to do some sort of if you need to generate random integers, for instance, there's no way to do that natively within CloudFormation except for to take, at least from what I've seen, you can either create a Lambda function, which runs it, and then you have to connect to all these other pieces just to run your CloudFormation template. Whereas in
Yeah.
Terraform, you run the random ID resource. It's way simpler. I know some people will split the stack ID to create a ephemeral ID or a random ID, and it just gets messy. So overall, I think CloudFormation has its place, especially in heavy AWS workloads, but I'm just not a huge fan compared to Terraform. Crossplane, I haven't used Crossplane too much. I kind of like where it's at. I like what it stands for, what it does, but there are a couple things I'm not a huge fan of. A lot of that is managing the infrastructure to run Crossplane. Just my personal thought, unless you're already in a pretty large enterprise or you already have Kubernetes clusters, I'm not thinking, gee, I'd really like to introduce a Kubernetes cluster to what I'm doing.
Yep.
And so that's me personally, but I absolutely see how it can be useful for somebody. Pulumi and CDK and the others that use your own languages, I like them a lot, and I think they're great for developers who are comfortable with those languages. But once you get into larger stacks and things like that, I don't think learning HCL is that difficult. It's probably the easiest thing I've ever had to learn. And so I don't really see a reason why you wouldn't want a purpose-built language without those extra guardrails and things put in place, because you start getting creativity in your infrastructure and too much creativity with programming languages and all of this other stuff. I think you're going to start running into problems where new developers end up encountering complicated, very difficult to read code because somebody wanted to be creative, or clever. And I just kind of like the idea of having a language built specifically for infrastructure where that's not really as much of a problem.
Yeah, great overview. I fully agree with everything you said. I think those are very logical reasons why we eventually see HCL and Terraform to dominate the infrastructure as code space, and also TerraGrant, which is uh, an interesting creature built aside from Terraform, which has its super interesting capabilities. I also want to mention, from my point of view, that besides everything you've described, which is like the natural things built in those approaches, eventually we have an ecosystem of other solutions and other providers. If I look at Datadog and Okta and Auth0, they all have Terraform providers. So if you want to use one technology that, besides being multi-cloud, is also usable for other SaaS solutions that you use in your production environment, is also important. And also built-in solutions for your pipelines, such as Chekhov or TFSec or TerraScan, that do static code analysis on your Terraform code and your plan. InfraCost, which provides um, cost estimation for your Terraform code. It currently supports only Terraform. So those, Atlantis is a great free open source that automates basic GitOps workflows for your Terraform code. So when you go the HCL and Terraform approach, at least today, you get a lot more from the community. And with that, I'm going to say, thanks to it being or used to be open source, when something is open source, you feel comfortable building other open source solutions that add more value to something. And yeah, so let's let's talk about that for a moment, because now this podcast is being recorded on October 23rd, 2023, which is 2 months and 13 days after August 10. And in that day, HashiCorp announced some changes. So Derek, how do you What are your thoughts about those changes that happened 2.5 months ago?
I've dealt with others that have done that. I'm actually still a fan of Timescale DB, for instance. Elastic is one, of course, Redis, all of these others that have gone through these same changes. It really depends on how they do it, and I understand you got to make money if you want to do these types of things and create these types of open source projects. You got to maintain them, all of this. So at first, I waited. I didn't say anything on the first day. I honestly, I just held back and waited to see how they handled it. I was not thrilled at the way HashiCorp has handled the whole thing. They, the just ask our lawyers and we'll see how things go, or we'll make sure that everything looks good. It just sounds too open ended. It's not really well thought through, and it's not something I'm willing to take a risk on. If I'm building a new platform or anything like that, it's not something that I'm a fan of. I don't want this ambiguity, knowing that if something does change in the future, which it absolutely can, all of a sudden all this work is gone. So I fully am on board with the open tofu movement now. Um, Again, it took me a little bit, especially, I've made a lot of money off of my Terraform courses and things. And so HashiCorp's got me a long way with this wonderful product, but I
Mhm.
just can't stand behind where they've gone with this. I think they could have done this a lot better. And it's unfortunate to see. So I'm rooting for Open Tofu. I think it's the right move, and we'll kind of see how that goes. But hopefully it's just a drop-in replacement for the most part, and we can get this thing moving pretty quickly.
Yeah, and just an important disclaimer: I am personally very much involved in the. It used to be named OpenTF, now OpenTofu initiative, and now it's an official project within the Linux Foundation. So it belongs to everybody under the Linux Foundation, and the license is ensured to be open source forever. It's not a vendor that manages that. It's a project within the Linux Foundation, which is really important. And yeah, if I may say, we also I'm also a founder of a company, Env0, and every time we raise money, we get in the due diligence uh, the normal question: show me all the licenses of the software that you're using. And what the lawyers are expecting in that process is to show everything Apache or MPL or MIT, open source licenses. And I'm just thinking about the next fundraising and trying to show, yeah, we're using this BSL, and go read this blog. Wait, there is another blog. There is another blog. And yeah, it's going to be okay. We're using software that is okay because there is a blog that ensures that it adds definitely some risk that I personally would like to avoid if there is a good alternative that is quick enough, efficient enough to replace, get the same capabilities, maybe better capabilities, and also ensure the vision, the roadmap, and continue to glue together other open source tools that work hand in hand with one tool. Um, let's talk about maybe the latest version of both Terraform and OpenTofu,
Mm-hmm.
version 1.6, that introduced the test
Right.
capabilities. What do you think about this new capability? How are you personally going to use it, and in which way?
Um, I'm not totally sure yet. I personally won't be. I'll probably stick to external testing tools. And of course,
Mhm.
anything I do that will be client facing will definitely be using OpenTofu from here on out. I will help people with existing Terraform if they'd like, or whatever. But otherwise, anything I do that has any type of client facing piece will go with OpenTofu, and I'll use any of the other conf test, whatever testing libraries and things to test.
Got
Um,
it. Mhm.
yeah, and now will I have a course that covers this? Yeah, probably. I'll probably end up still covering Terraform. I'm going to add all these things. I will do lessons on them if people want them, whatever. But as far as anything client facing, just too much legal ambiguity.
Got it. And if you can make a wish, what
Mm-hmm.
would be the number one ask to the OpenTofu project to implement within OpenTofu?
Ooh, that's tough. Honestly, and
I
this
can
is
help. I
no,
can help.
a lot of people think this might be crazy because nobody uses it. But Terraform
Mhm.
console is
Mhm.
something that I use all the time to work with
Mhm.
more aggravating functions and nested functions. And when you start getting really weird with outputs, I use Terraform console a lot. If OpenTofu included a console that worked and was better than the one that is used with
Got it.
Terraform currently, I would be actually very thrilled.
Did you open an issue in the OpenTofu project repo to indicate that request or not yet?
Not yet. I really, really need to get on the Open
Mhm.
Tofu thing and start. Now that Alpha's out, I plan on playing with it very, very soon. I just have not
Mhm.
had a chance over the past several weeks.
Got it. Cool. Derek, sounds like you've seen a lot over the years in the involvement of infrastructure and infrastructure management, and now with the new episode of infrastructure as code and the license change, it's going to be interesting to see the future of Terraform, the future of OpenTofu, and by the way, how it affects other frameworks. I've heard some customers considering moving from Terraform to Pulumi and Crossplane. I've heard some customers holding off migration from CloudFormation and ARM templates to Terraform to see what's going on. There is some definitely uncertainty in the market today, so some folks are wait and see mode regarding the future. So it's going to be interesting maybe to host you again in a year or something and talk about what happened
I'd love to.
the last year. Any other things you want to tell to our audience?
No, I mean, otherwise, any type of shameless plug, of course, check me out if you want to learn Terraform and any DevOps things, follow me LinkedIn, Twitter, whatever. And I think that's most of it.
Perfect. Thanks a lot, Derek, for being with us today. And thank you all for listening. I'm Ohad Maislish. You can follow me at DevOps Ohad. And please check out the rest of the episodes at the IaC Podcast.com. Thank you so much and have a great rest of the day.
All right. Cheers.